All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. It is what a way to bring in Rosh Chodesh Elul, Baruch Hashem with Maseches Kesuvos. Beautiful davening together, beautiful black Gemara ahead of us. Not a lot of time to do a lot of Gemara, but in Eretz Hashem, we're gonna make a go for it. I want to begin in Eretz Hashem by thanking all of our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for Chodesh Elul, Shrendi and Avram Kelman from Eretz Yisrael, in honor of Yechiel's engagement to Alana Falik, and in memory of their parents, Jerome and Benice Kelman, and Alexander and Frederica David Aleim Shalom Zichron Livrach. We hope that the merit of our Talmud Torah. Eretz Hashem, the Chasen and Kala, come under the Chuppah B'Shah Tova Mitzlachas, and all of the Neshamas have an Aliyah and the families a Nechama. The Daf Yomi share in the Schusar Refuah Shlema for Yehuda ben Michal. He should have a refuah together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. And our Daf Yomi share today sponsored by Greg and Rena Tressman in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Greg's mother, Dori Tressman, Zichron Librach. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama will have an Aliyah and the family in Nechama. But with that, let us begin. A lot to do today, a really beautiful daf ahead of us. Today's daf is Nun Gimel, 53. We left off, right? Good. We left off Nun Beis and with Beis. So let's actually pick up with the Gemara says, well, it's really actually Umi'ika. It's just the line in. So remember again, just to reorient ourselves a little bit, the Mishnah introduced us, although we've been introduced long ago, to the concept of Kesuvos Benin Dichrin. So what our Mishnah gave us was the actual phraseology that is used in the Kesuva, where there is a line that ultimately, and I forgot to announce, the shir today is also dedicated by Sima and Said Hakin, the refreshments as well, in honor of Rosh Chodesh Elul, Said's birthday. Said, what number? Over 50 and under. Okay. Over 50, good. And Eretz Hashem al me'aver esim shanim tovos. All right, so let's with that let us continue. So remember again, the Mishnah introduced us to the concept or the phraseology of the Kesuvos Benin Dichrin. Now remember again, we've already been learning about this, but this is a unique phrase written into the Kesuva where a man marries a woman, Reuven marries Rachel, and in the Kesuva it says, any sons that we have together will solely inherit your Kesuva, independent of any other Yerusha considerations. This was such an important piece of the marriage contract that the Mishnah tells us, even failure to actually write or incorporate this clause, it's still binding. It's still binding because the Mishnah tells us it is a T'nai Beis Din. It's just a stipulation of Beis Din. And Rabbi, as you said yesterday, no different than what's the halacha if a man fails to write a Kesuva altogether. Reuven marries Rachel, Mazel Tov. In the hectic pace of the wedding, they forgot to write the Kesuva. What's the halacha? They have a Kesuva. Why? Because it's a T'nai Beis Din. A T'nai Beis Din does not need to be actually recorded in order for it to be in effect. Kesuvos Benin Dichrin is the same idea. So says the Gemara. So what the Gemara was bothered by is, one second, the concept of Kesuvos Benin Dichrin means that a father is ultimately going ahead. Now remember, the Mishnah said, why are we doing this? Why are we writing Kesuvos Benin Dichrin? We want fathers to give their daughters dowry, right? What's the challenge? If the father knows in the potential that Chas Shalom, his daughter, predeceases her husband, that the husband is going to inherit everything as much as the father-in-law likes his son-in-law, Lamaisa, he's nervous about the fact that all of his property is going to go now to the son-in-law and the son-in-law's family. So in order to go ahead and allow the father to comfortably give his daughter dowry, what we do is we keep it in their bloodline. So this way the father knows that even Chas Shalom, if my daughter passes away, predeceases her husband, halacha l'maisa, any dowry that I give her will pass down to her children, her sons, and her sons only. To which the Gemara said, but one second, aren't you essentially circumventing biblical inheritance law? You're taking property that would have normally gone to the sons, now you're giving it to the daughter. This is where we're picking up on both sides. So the Gemara says, Hanami Doraisuhu. It's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 lines up from the bottom. Hanami Doraisu. Dichsev, Kichu Noshim Validu Banim Ubanos, Ukichu Livnechem Noshim. The pasuk says, now again, it's interesting that it calls this a Doraisa. It's a pasuk from Yirmiyahu and Navi. The pasuk says, take wives, Kichu Noshim Validu Banim, have sons and daughters, and take for your sons wives and your daughters give to men. Bishlam Banim Biadei Kaimi. So it's interesting. I have the ability to marry off my sons Because in general, it's easier to navigate a shidduch for a boy. Ela banse mi kaimen biyade. But does a man really have the power to marry off his daughters? Yeah. Hakamash walan dinil bashav nichse v'nesiv la midi ki heche de kaftsi aleva asu nasbile. Yeah, there's a way to ensure your daughter gets married. What's the way to ensure your daughter gets married? Give her a big dowry. If you give her a big dowry, it's amazing. It's amazing how the chasanim come out of the woodwork. And also understand, this goes back to what we always say, which is the construct of marriage that the Gemara is operating with is a fundamentally different type of relationship, right? Again, emotions are not really part of the consideration. So you have to understand something. In the Talmudic construct of marriage, it's quite fascinating. When does love occur? When does love occur? After you get married. In other words, there's no notion of falling in love and the birds chirping and the rainbows and all this kind of stuff, right? That's Disney. Well, it used to be Disney before other stuff got right. But Lamaisa, again, none of that is. This doesn't go into it. So the idea is, remember, marriage was a financial issue for a woman. It gave her financial security. If for a man, it could also give him financial security if his wife is coming in with a dowry. So what's the way, says the Gemara, to ensure that your daughter gets a shidduch? Give her a good dowry. So therefore, again, it's also daraisa. Vad kama. How much should a man give to his daughter? How much of his estate should he go ahead and give towards his dowry? 1/10 of your estate. Pretty incredible. So, which is a pretty significant dowry to give a daughter, especially if a person has more than one child or more than one daughter. That's a lot of property. Give 1/10 to the dowry. Ve'ema da'av liros de balo liros. To which the Gemara says, well, why don't you go ahead and say like this? Maybe, remember again, Kesuvos ben Indichrin does like this. It says that the sons inherit the entirety of their mother's ksuva. Now, remember, there are two parts to the ksuva. There's what's called ikar ksuva, which is the 100 or the 200, depending on if it's first marriage or second marriage. And then there's the dowry. So why don't we say that the sons, da'av liros, da'bal liros? Maybe Kesuvos ben Indichrin should say the sons of Reuben and Rachel should inherit their mother's dowry portion of the ksuva, but maybe not the 100, 200 part. To which the Gemara says, Imkain av nami minni velo kasav. Now we'll say, again, the father wants to know that everyone has skin in the game. So the same way that the sons will inherit their mother's portion from the husband, so therefore the sons will also inherit the portion from the father. Ve'ima hecha, the kasav av lichtov bal, hecha de lo kasav av lo lichtov bal. Maybe the only time we should include this phrase is when the father gives a significant dowry. But if the father doesn't give the significant dowry, then Lamaisa, the husband shouldn't have to write the clause. Well, remember, let me just to be clear. Kesuvos ben Indichrin covers two parts. It says, right, Reuven marries Rachel, and Reuven writes in the ksuva, your ksuva will be inherited by our sons, the sons we have together. There are two parts of that ksuva. There's the ikar ksuva, which is the 100 zuz, the 200 zuz. That's Reuven's obligation towards Rachel. And then the rest of her ksuva is her dowry. So the Gemara says, well, one second. Let's say Rachel's not coming into the marriage with any dowry. There's no dowry. So why should Reuven be chayiv to go ahead and pledge the ksuva to their sons as opposed to just letting it fall to the general estate? To which the Gemara says, lo plug rabbanon. Ultimately, again, Chazal don't make a distinction. Bas ben abanim nami tiros. Why don't we say that therefore daughters should also inherit the ksuva of their mother? The Gemara says, Kinach lo shavio rabbanon, because the rabbis made Kesuvos ben Indichrin like inheritance. And just like inheritance is inherited by sons and not by daughters, so too this is inherited by sons and not by daughters. Bas ben abanos teros. What if there are only daughters? Let the daughters inherit. Lo plug rabbanon. Chazal did not make a distinction. V'tigvi mi metaltali. Why don't you go ahead and say, we'll say that again. Kesuvos ben Indichrin should allow the sons to inherit even metaltal and movable property. Kiksuva shavu rabbanon. Ultimately, Chazal made it like a ksuva. And just like a woman on her ksuva only has a claim against her husband for real property, so to Kesuvos ben Indichrin only devolves upon real property as well. Titrov mimishubadi. Maybe the sons should have the ability to go ahead and collect from the chasim mishubadim. Let's say their mother sold off, or the mother sold off parts of her dowry during the marriage. Maybe after her death, the sons should be able to go back and collect it. To which the Gemara says, Yarsun Tanan. It has the din of Yerusha. And just like after a parent passes away, Yarshim, heirs, don't have the ability to go back and seize any sold properties. So too, they have no ability to seize sold property here as well. The original is ve'ema afagav deleka mosar dinar. So I will say we're going to talk about this sugya in Emirat Hashem in a couple of weeks from now. But the concept of mosar dinar ultimately is that in order to go ahead and collect, in order to collect ksuva, there has to be something left in the estate afterwards. So perhaps, I'm not getting into the technicalities of this now, but the Gemara says maybe ksuvas ben dichrin should be collectible even if it leaves nothing else in the estate, to which the Gemara says, b'makom dikama akre nachla da'araisa lo takinu rabbanon. As much as Chazal has a vested interest in Kesuvos ben dichrin, if the collection of Kesuvos ben dichrin is going to undermine the rest of the inheritance, then Kesuvos ben dichrin is suspended. Again, Rabbi say we'll see what that means in a little bit. Rabbi say an incredible story. Rav Papa, I'm sorry for the speed that we're going. Rav Papa, i'asik le librei be abasura. Rabbi say, listen to this story. Rav Papa made the shidduch for his son with the daughter of Abasura. Okay, good. So Mazel Tov. Azal michtav like Ksuvasa. So Papa was going over to the house of Abba Surah to write up the Ksuva. Now, and I remember again now what is he really going for? When we say write up the Ksuva, what is he going for? He's going over to Abba Surah to say, Abba Surah, how much are you giving for your daughter's dowry? So right, he's going over to the house, the in-laws of the Machatam are meeting. How much is the dowry going to be? So watch this. Kimat lepischa. Sorry, I skipped the line. Good. Shama Yehuda Bar Mereimar. Yehuda Bar Mereimar heard that his friend Rav Papa was going to write up the Ksuva. Nafik Asai Ischazile. So Yehuda Bar Mereimar comes out to say Mazel Tov. He walks with Rav Papa a little bit. Kimat lepischa. When they got to the house of Abba Surah, Hava Kamiftar Mina. Yehuda was gonna leave it, right? Yehuda was gonna leave. I'm not going in with you for this. This is like financial negotiation. I'm not going in. So Amrle Neil Mar Bahadai. So Rav Papa says to Yehuda, come in with me. Tap of Nun Gimel. Chaz Yedelo Hava Nechale. So what happens? Rav Papa saw that Yehuda did not want to come inside. He didn't want to go into the house of Abba Surah. Amrle Mai Daitech. What are you worried about? What are you worried about? Is it because Mishum the Amrle Shmuel Rav Yehuda Shinina? Is it because of what Shmuel said to Rav Yehuda? Shinina, both say Shinina means sharp one. It's a compliment. Sharp one. Lo tehevi ba'abure achsanta afilu mibra bisha lebratava. In general, both says it's such a profound idea. You should never really be part of the moving of inheritance. Don't be part of a transaction, or don't be part of a situation where a father is moving over inheritance from one child to another, even if he's moving it mibrabisha libratava, even if he's moving it from a bad son to a good son. Why? Delo yadina mai zara nafik mine. Why? I will say because a father might say to himself, my kid Ruvain is terrible, right? I shouldn't say he's doing terrible things. Shimon is a malach. Shimon is a malach. You know what? I'm going to move the inheritance from Ruvain to Shimon. Right to Shimon. So Shmuel said to Rav Yehuda, don't be there when a father does that. Why? Because the truth is it's a mistake. Because even if Reuven is doing the wrong thing now, you never know what? Future generations that may come from Reuven, and the inheritance you give Reuven ultimately could benefit future generations. The Choshik Kesuvos say, by the way, what a Gemara to read on Chodesh Elul. See, sometimes we look at ourselves and we're down and out. Right? And we look at ourselves and we're disappointed. We're disappointed for a lack of accomplishment. I'm disappointed for all of the mistakes that I've made. But the truth is, sometimes in life we make the mistake of only judging ourselves based on what we are right now. But we forget, my zara nafik mine. Zara, Bosai, does not just have to be your biological offspring. You know what your ultimate zara is? Your ultimate offspring? Eile toldos Noach. These are the generations of Noach. What are the generations? What was the greatest offspring that Noach ever had? Who was the greatest offspring that Noach ever had? Noach. Sometimes the greatest thing you create in life is not your children. The greatest thing you birth in life is you. You can make you. You can create you. You can recreate you. Eile toldos Noach. What are the generations of Noach? Noach. The Gemara says over here, sometimes I'm a bra bisha. Sometimes I'm a son who's not doing the right thing. But it's okay. You never know. Delo yadinon, my zara nafik mine. You never know, Rabbi say, what type of offspring that you could produce. Not biological offspring, personalistic offspring, the offspring of change, the offspring of Maisim Tovim. Who knows what you could accomplish? Certainly you shouldn't be part of where you see a father moving inheritance from a son to a daughter. So Rav Papa says to Yehuda, maybe you're uncomfortable because by Abba Surah writing dowry to his daughter, what is he effectively doing? He's moving inheritance, what would potentially be inheritance, from sons to a daughter. To which Rav Papa says, don't worry. Rabbi said, but that's okay. Writing a dowry to your daughter is a takonas chachamim. This is what we're seeing, right? This is what we just saw before. Halacha l'maisa, Chazal want a father to write a sizable dowry to his daughter. Why? Because Chazal want the Jewish girls to get married. And this helps to facilitate marriage. Amar Le, so we'll say, watch this. So Yehuda said, it's true. Amar Le, hani mili midaite. So ultimately, Yehuda says that's true. But Rav Papa, I'm concerned that the reason you're asking me to come inside to the house of Abba Surah is why? You're hoping that my presence is going to force Abba Surah to give more. Right here, Rav Papa's showing up with Yehuda Bar Mereimar. These great Rabbanim are showing up at my house. They're going to sit at my table. And what is everybody going to be looking at? The amount of money I'm giving my daughter, the dowry. And so Yehuda shows up. It's a strong arm tactic. Papa, what are you talking about? I'm just saying, come with me. We'll make a l'chaim together. I'm not asking you to strong arm anyone. I'm not asking you to go ahead and compel anyone. I'm just inviting you to come along. Yehuda said, my mere presence is going to be perceived as a pressure to Abba Surah. Okay. Nevertheless, Rav Papa compelled Yehuda. Yehuda comes in. Rabbi say, watch this story. So Yehuda's sitting at the table, ishtik v'yasiv. He's just sitting there silently. He's not saying a word. Savar hahu mirsas rasas. Rabbi say, this is incredible. So you have to imagine the scene over here. Abba Surah is writing the dowry for his daughter, right? The chassin, the son of Rav Papa. Yehuda is sitting there silently. So Abba Surah is writing the Kesuva. Yehuda's silent. Abba Surah interpreted Yehuda's silence as what? As Yehuda being angry. Angry, like, what's the word? Kamtsun. He's such a miser, right? You're not giving your daughter. So what does he do? Kasve l'chol mai dahavele. Abba Surah wrote his entire estate into the Kesuva. L'sof Amrle, and Yehuda's still quiet. At this point, Abba Surah loses it. Amrle, hashta lami lo mishta imar. Yehuda, still you're not saying anything? Chaye demar lo shavak midei l'nafshay. I don't have a penny left to my name, and you're still not happy? Here's in other words, I will say, by the way, what a maisa. There's a maisim b'chol yom. That we so the whole chap over here is, right, Abba Surah interprets Yehuda's silence as Yehuda being upset that Abba Surah is not generous. Meaning, why is Yehuda silent? Why is Yehuda silent? Why is he silent? I just want to get involved. I just don't want to get involved. So Abba Surah loses it. Still, you're not talking. I gave my daughter everything. You're still not talking. So Amrle Yehuda finally says something. So Yehuda says, if you ask me, I think you gave too much. I think you totally gave too much. Amrle Hashanami Ahadabe. So Abba Surah, okay, good. Can I retract this? Amrle Shavye Nafsha Hadrana Lo Kamina. No. The one thing you don't want to be is a Hadrana. Hadrana, loosely translated, is an Indian giver, right? Are you allowed to say that? I don't know if you're allowed to say that anymore, right? Okay, good. I don't want to. Right? So say so again. Yeah, I know. Good. So no. He'll say so again. So lemaisa again. Hadrana means don't be the kind of person who gives stuff and then takes it back, right? So we'll say so. By what? So first of all, an incredible story. Incredible story, I will say. That Lamaisa, again, just the Musar Haskiliness, I will say, is that at the end of the day, Halacha Lamaisa. So first of all, the point of the story is that Lamaisa, you should give a good amount of the dunya, right, of nadin, of dowry to your daughter. But Lamaisa, what's also profound about this is an interpersonal lesson about how so often we jump to conclusions about what people are feeling or what people are doing when all we should really do is ask, instead of trying to surmise what it is that they're feeling or what it is that they're thinking. And Kerala said the other piece, third lesson, Hadrana lo kamina. When you give your word, give your word. Right? When you do something, do right. When you commit to something, commit to something. And sometimes, even if lamaisa, it turns out that what I've committed to is detrimental. Obviously, sometimes a person has to back out of certain things. But lamaisa, there's a yesod of motzas vasecha tishmar, that when I make a commitment to something, honor the commitment. So we'll say, now watch this. Let's say a woman sells her ksuva to her husband. So we'll say, so now this is an interesting case. What's happening here is a woman could sell her ksuva. We're going to talk about this. Now we'll say, now how do you sell your ksuva? How do you sell your ksuva? Essentially, what are you selling? You're selling a future. You're selling a future. Now remember again, the sale of a ksuva is really only meaningful if what? If what? Upon death or divorce, right? Either the husband dies, right, or they get divorced. Technically speaking, if you buy a ksuva and the wife predeceases the husband, what's the value of the ksuva? 0. Shabbos says, so now watch this. Now, the truth is, the only time a ksuva has value in the event that the wife dies is ksuvas ben indichrin, right? Because then the sons will inherit it. So now here's the case. Wife sells her ksuva to her husband, an interesting case. So what's the shaila? Yesh la ksuvas ben indichrin or ein la ksuvas ben indichrin. Ultimately, again, so the Gemara says, so is there a concept? In other words, if she sells the ksuva to her husband, does that sale negate ksuvas ben indichrin or not? Forget about a case of sale. What about a case of mocheles? She forgives the ksuva. She just forgave the ksuva to her husband. In other words, we'll say, ksuva is a debt. Is a debt. Ruvain owes me $1,000. Can I be mochel? Can I be mochel the chov? Can I be mochel it? Yeah. So now husband owes wife a ksuva. What if she's mochel the ksuva? So does that also go ahead and forgive the ksuvas ben indichrin? I'm asking a case of mocheres. Why? Because the case of a sale is stronger. Because they both say, why would a woman sell her ksuba? Why would a woman sell her ksuba? Why? She needs money. That's what's happening over here. She needs money. And I will say, when a person needs money, it's as if literally, it's as if a person is being whipped with a whip that has iron pieces at the end. In other words, financial duress is overwhelming. And when a person is experiencing financial duress, they may even sell those things that are closest to them. A ksuba for a woman is a very important thing. So in a case, so I will say, that's why we're dafka asking the case ultimately of a sale. Because of a sale, there's an element of duress. So again, if mochela, she's just forgiving it, okay, that's whatever is going to be true by mechira is certainly going to be true by mechila. Amrava, pshitali, it's obvious to me, mocheres ksuva sala achirim, if she sells her ksuva to others, yesh la ksuvas ben indichrin. The clause of ksuvas ben indichrin still applies, which are both saying is something amazing. So let's say Rachel sells her ksuva to a third party, a future right to a third party. If she dies, her sons will still inherit her dowry. So therefore, again, the sons have the ability to extract that property from whoever it's been sold to. My time, but what's the reason for that? Zuzi ansua. In a case of sale, we assume that she is experiencing financial duress. If she simply forgives her ksuva to her husband, there is no ksuvas ben indichrin clause. My time, what's the reason? Achuli achilta. She's been mochal. So Rava asked, Mocheret ksuvasa lebaila. So Rabbi says, now let's circle back. So here's what we know. When a woman sells her ksuva to others, Salach Lamaisa, the ksuvas ben indichrin clause still applies. If she's mochel her ksuva to her husband, the ksuvas ben indichrin doesn't apply. So what's the one case that's still outstanding? Watch this. Rava, Mocheres ksuvasa lebaila. What happens if she sells her ksuva to her husband? How do we look at that case? Kimocheres la'achirim dami is a sale, and whether she's selling it to her husband, she's selling it to someone else. That's a case of mechira, and in mechira, ksuvas ben indichrin still applies. O kimocheres la'bayla. Or do we look at a case of a sale to a husband, like a mechila to a husband, and therefore no ksuvas ben indichrin? Basa debai hadar pashta. After they asked it, they answered it. Mocheres ksuva lebayla ki mocheres la'achirim dami. Shabbos say essentially in halacha, there are two cases. There's a sale and a mechila. Now remember, mechila could only happen to who? Could only happen to who? to the husband, right? Obviously, so when she is mochel the ksuva, the halacha is ksuvas benedichrin is null and void. If she's mochel the ksuva, husband now again, if she dies, husband inherits everything. In a case of mechira, of a sale, whether she's selling to the husband or selling to a third party, if she dies, ksuvas benedichrin still applies. Because we assume the motivation for a sale is financial duress, and therefore ksuvas benedichrin still applies. Incredible. Maseh Ravi Dibar Avin Mesa Ein Yorshin Shalzeh Ein Yorshin Shalzeh Yorshin Ksubasa. They both say back to our Yivamis days. Don't get the shakes, right? Don't get nervous about this. Only for a couple of moments, right? So it says, remember again we had the case in Yivamis. This is the case of an Eid Echad comes along and tells Rachel, your husband died. Ruvain died. What does Rachel do? She marries Shimon. It turns out that who comes to the Sheva Brachas? Who comes to Sheva Brachas? Ruvain. He is Panim Chadoshos, right? So it says, right, Ruvain shows up at Sheva Brachas. So we'll say now we have a problem. What's the halacha? Teitze mizeh umizeh. The halacha is she has to leave both husbands. None of that the Gemara says. If she dies, right, Yarshin Shalzeh, so neither set of heirs have the ability to inherit her ksuva. V'havinaba, we ask, ksuva samaya vidite. They both say there's no ksuva in either of these cases. In fact, the halacha is, not only does she have to leave husband one and husband two, but there's no ksuva from either of those husbands. So what do you mean that neither of the Yarshim get the ksuva? There is no ksuva. Papa, ksuvas benedichrin. Oh, what are we talking about? Ksuvas benedichrin. Va'amai. Hachanami lema yetzer ansa. And we'll say, but over here, why don't we say halacha l'maisa again? This was the case the same way that if she sells the ksuva, if she sells her ksuva, we say zuze ansa. Ultimately, again, there's financial duress. That's why halacha l'maisa. Halacha l'maisa. She goes that the ksuvas benedichrin still applies. So why do we say over here also yetzer ansa? She had a desire to get remarried, right? She wanted to get remarried. It's extenuating circumstances, and therefore there should be ksuvas benedichrin as well. To which the Gemara says hasam knasu de kansu rabbanon. We'll say you're right. It's knas. It's knas. Part of the knas. We'll say, remember again, back to our Yivam states for just a moment. The whole yisod of relying on Eid Echad to allow a woman to get married is based on what? The fact that what is she going to do? She's going to do her due diligence. When she doesn't do her due diligence, we penalize her. Part of that penalty is what? That halacha l'maisa no ksuvas benedichrin. Incredible. So the Gemara says, Yosef Rabin Bar Chanina Kamed Rav Chisda v'Yosef v'Kam B'Shmei Rabbi Elazar mocheles ksuvas l'bayla ein la mizonos. Interesting case. If a woman is mochel her ksuva to her husband, she no longer gets mizonos. Which I will say, what's the logic of that? The logic of that is mizonos is a t'nai ksuva, right? Is one of the functions of ksuva, and therefore halacha l'maisa. If she is mochel her ksuva, then l'maisa there is no mizonos. He said, had this statement not been said in the name of a great man, I would have said, that it's such an ungrateful thing. Here, the wife is being mochel her ksuva. And I both say, who benefits when the wife is mochel her ksuva? Who benefits? The husband. The least he could do is support her. In other words, give her mizonos. Why would we penalize her more in the event that she's mochel? To which she wants to Yosef Nachal V'ula Va'avimi Bar Papi V'Yosef Rav Chia Bar Ami Gabayu. Supposed to listen to this. Also, now by the way, that happens to be the halacha, right? That happens to be the halacha. That if she is mocheles her ksuva, then halacha l'maisa. Ultimately, again, she no longer gets mizonos, right? Why not? Because again, it's a technical issue. Because l'maisa mizonos is a function of ksuva. Supposed to listen to this story. All these rabbanim are sitting together. What happened? Asu gavra d'shchiva arusasa. There was a guy, right? Ruvain. He had erisin with Rachel. What happened? Rachel passed away during erisin. So Rabbi says, Amrulei zil kavar havlok suvasa. So they said to the chassan, bury your kala. In other words, you have to pay for a burial or pay out her ksuva to her heirs. Amrullahu Rav Chia Tanina. Really? So in other words, Rav Chia was bothered by this. Are you saying therefore that a husband during erisin has a chiyuv of kvur? And I remember again, Abosai, the obligation that a husband has to bury his wife is a function of what? Is also what? A t'nai ksuva. So what they're telling is this guy that apparently there's a din of ksuva even during erisin. Is that true? But we learned ishto arusa lo onin v'lo metamela. If a man has erisin with a woman and she passes away, If he's a Kohen, he doesn't become tummy for her. There's no aninus for her. V'chein hi lo onenes v'lo metamelo. So too, she has no aninus and no tuma for him. Meisa eno yarsha. Similarly, if she passes away, he does not inherit her. Meishu, if he dies, go v'ksuvasa. She collects her ksuva. Taima de meishu. Now, the reason she collects her ksuva is because he died. Ha meisa hi. But if she dies, ein lo ksuva. There's no ksuva that he's obligated to pay out to her Yershin. If that's the case, why would he have a chiyuv to go ahead and bury her, to pay for her burial, if burial is a t'nai ksuva? To which the Gemara says, "My time Rav she'in ani koreba lechishetinasi la'achar titli mashe kasuv lechi." Because I will say ultimately again, why is it that halacha lamaisa, that if she predeceases him, ultimately again there is no claim, right? There is no claim for ksuva or for burial. Ultimately, because remember again, ksuva is collectible upon death or divorce from the husband. So again, there is no ksuva collection if the wife predeceases her husband. So therefore, I will say ultimately again, Reb Chia argued back on this and said the arus should have no obligation to pay for the burial of his arusa. So the Gemara says, Ki asa Ravin Amrei Shlakish, arusa shemesa ein la ksuva. If an arusa passes away, she has no ksuva. Which is another way of saying there's no ksuva payment, and the arus has no obligation to pay for her burial. Amrulu Abaye says, Zilu Amrule, go say to him, go say to Reish Lakish, Shakila Amudeis, Shakila Tivusech, Shajiach Izri. Take your good and throw it on the thorn bushes. It's one of these phrases that sounds much better in the Aramaic than the translation, right? I will say the idea is, take your good and throw it on the thorn bushes means you're not doing anything for us, right? What you think you're doing, you're not doing anything. In other words, we already had this halacha before. Rav Hoshi already said this in Bavel, namely that an arusa doesn't have a ksuva. And therefore, I will say for our purposes, if the arusa predeceases her arus, she passes away during erusin, halacha l'maisa what? Halacha l'maisa, he is not obligated to pay for her burial. Incredible. So we'll say, let's go a little bit back. We have a few minutes left. Remember, the next part of the Mishnah was what? The next part of the Mishnah was that a man writes in the ksuva, any daughters we have together will be supported by my estate. In other words, can live in my house, are supported by my estate until when? Until you get married. Until they get married. So the Gemara says, we have different versions of this. Rav Tani, Adit Telachon Gavron. Rav says that the father commits to support his daughters until they get married. Until they get married. But Levi Tani Adit Tisbagrun. Levi says until the daughter becomes a Bulgaris. The Rav Afagav de Bagar. So is Rav saying that Allah Lamaisa, if a girl becomes a Bulgaris but hasn't yet gotten married, the father still has an obligation to support her. The Levi Afagav de Insiv. And would Levi say lemaisa again, even if she gets married, right? That halacha lemaisa. Say ela bagar velo insiv velo bagar ducholi amalo pligi. Right? It goes without saying. If a daughter becomes a bulgaris, the obligation for support stops. Similarly, once a daughter gets married, even before bagrus, the obligation to support stops. In other words, so support is terminated. When I say terminated, the obligation for a father to support his daughter ends at one of two intervals. Either at bagrus, or when? At marriage. At marriage. So pligi. Shabbos say, where does the machlokes come up? Ba'arusa velo bagar. Here's an interesting case. What happens if the girl becomes an arusa and she's a nara? She's not a bogeres. She's a nara. So Shabbos say, what is a father's obligation towards his nara daughter during erusin? Right? Fascinating. Because remember, again, everyone agrees. Right? If she becomes a Bulgaris, no obligation for support. Nisuin, no obligation for support. There's this interesting window. What happens if she's an Arusa and a Nara, or an Erusin and Narus? Is there an obligation for support? To which the Gemara says, so keep ligi ba'arusa v'la bagar. V'chein tani de masnisa, ad tebagrun, v'yamtiz manehen de insibin. So I will say, ultimately, again, this is what Levi had also. According to Levi, the way it was written was, I will support you until you become a Bulgaris and the time for your marriage comes about. So the Gemara says, Tarti, you need both of those things. Ela o tisbagrun, o yamti zmaneun isnasba. Rather, what it means is like this. A father says, I'll support my daughter either until she becomes a Bulgaris or until the time for her to get married comes out. Rabbi say, what does it mean, the time for her to get married? Rabbi say, remember again, Bismana Gemara, how did it work? There was time between Erusin and Nisuin. How much time between Erusin and Nisuin? 12 months, a year. A year, we'll call it 12 months. Right? So Rabbi say, what the father says is like this. In Levi's version, it's like this. Father agrees to support his daughter either up until the time that she becomes a Bulgaris or up until the time she should be getting married, which means what? That during Erusin, he agrees to continue to support her, right? Assuming she's not yet a Bulgaris. When does that obligation, or when does that commitment to support her terminate? 12 months after Erusin. At that point in time, the father says to the chassan, listen, you're supposed to marry her now. And if you're not marrying her now, Lemais again, I'm no longer providing support. Support will now fall upon you, which is what goes back to the beginning of Kesuvos. To which the Gemara says, Kitanoi, in reality, this is Machlokes Tanoim. Admaseh Abbas Nizonis, Nabose, we're switching gears a little bit over here. This case, Admaseh Abbas Nizonis, is the following case. Father passed away. Remember, when father passes away, where is his orphan daughter supported from? Where is she supported from? The estate. In other words, as much as maybe sons inherit, that's fine, they might have the title, but Lamai said the estate has an obligation to support the daughters. Ad Maseh Abbas Nizonis, Ad Sheti Ares, until Erusin. Once Erusin comes, then what? Now the husband has the Aros has an obligation to support his wife. Ad Erusin. Amru, Ad Sheti Bager. Rabbi Elazar says, no, the estate has an obligation to support her up until Bagrus. Tani Rav Yosef, Ad Diahavyon. Rav Yosef says, ultimately again, Ad Diahavyon. Rabbi say, Diahavyon Haloshin Havia means up until marriage. Ibailu, which stage of marriage? Ibailu, Havia de Erusin or Havia de Nisuin. Doesn't mean that the estate has to support the daughter up until Erusin or up until Nisuin. Teku. Ultimately, again, that question was left unresolved. Rav Yosef, right? Did you hear anything about what Rabbi Yehuda says? Arusa yesh la mazonos or in la mazonos. So we'll say, so remember, again, we're talking over here specifically about an orphan's daughter's support from the estate. Does an orphan daughter who is an arusa, is she supported from the estate of her deceased father, from the estate, or is the support obligation from her? So we'll have to stop over here for today. We'll stop, okay? We did all right, considering the amount of time that we had. I apologize the speed at which we went. We'll pick up here at Mirat Hashem. We're going to start shir tomorrow morning at 4:30. We're going to start at 5:45 at Mirat Hashem. By 5:45, we'll catch up. We'll start it for today. We'll say Shkoyach, a Guten Chodesh, a special Mazel Tov to Shmuel Franco on putting on tefillin today for the first time on Rosh Chodesh Elul. Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. Shkoyach Habosai. What are you, Shmuel? Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. Yeah, it doesn't scare. Everyone, Zoom, have a great day, everyone.
I got a few more weeks left. Got it. So 12 months. The date would be the year 7.